In this video, we're just going to have a look at the differences between Elementor and Brizy, and it's really just to get an idea of what they're about. So on the left, you can see we have the Elementor homepage. It looks a little bit kind of dated in a way and very blocky, and the Brizy website looks a lot more fresher, a lot softer, and more modern. And we'll have a look and see if that translates through into the builders that are used and what's possible with the builders. So to get started, then the kind of to level the playing field, I went with the Blocksy theme, and in the Blocksy theme, you can load up some starter templates. And when you choose your starter template, you're allowed to choose between Elementor and Brizy. So what I did is I chose the same template, but then Blocksy on the one and Brizy on the one and Elementor on the other. So on the left-hand side, we're going to be mainly focusing on Elementor. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see we'll be focusing on the Brizy side of things. So first we install the template and we select Elementor as the editor. And then on the right-hand side, I did the same process and imported using Brizy as the editor. It's not really, there wasn't really much difference in it between the installing of the two. They basically finished in about the same amount of time in terms of the delay between activating Elementor and then activating Brizy. So the packages are installed. On the left-hand side, we're going to look at Elementor, and on the right-hand side, we're going to be looking at Brizy. So we're just going to go ahead now and have a look at the various sites and see how they compare. They should both look very similar. So if we're looking at the Elementor site, and the About Us page, the blog page, contact page, and everything looks pretty well formatted. Yeah, looks pretty good. And if we scroll down, you'll see that everything looks nice and formatted. So yeah, it looks pretty much like the demo template. And then if we go along and we look on the Brizy side, you'll see that we have pretty much the same kind of layout. So if we scroll down, you'll see it looks pretty similar to what we had on the Elementor side. And if we look at the other pages, you'll see that they are also very similar to what we saw on the Elementor side. So the About Us page, the blog page, the contact page. Right, so let's head back to the home page, and then we're going to try some edits, and then we're just going to have a look and see how they compare. So back to the home page, and now you'll see that because I'm using a half screen and a half screen, it's kind of like a bit of a tablet view. And you can already see the difference taken. The mobile menus are similar, but the layouts do differ. And you can see just how they differ. You'll see the elements are kind of preserved a bit better on the Brizy side. And also the image choices are also slightly different. So they look a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. So there's another difference in size, but the general message is getting across, very similar. And then if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, so it's really a matter of personal preference here, and I must say that I thought that Brizy preserved the layout a little bit better, especially there in the header. I thought it looked a bit better, and you'll see that in the default, everything is a bit aligned to the left, and that's pretty much why I preferred the Brizy one. When loading up the Elementor editor, I first had to go and get a kit, and I had to recreate this kit, something to do with the way that Elementor works. So quite painless, just head over, hit the buttons to sync, recreate, regenerate, save the changes, and then went straight back, refreshed the page, and everything worked. So there we were able to load up the editor, and you'll notice there's quite a big difference in the way that the editors work. So Elementor loads up, and on the left-hand side you have this navigation between adding elements and the settings. and the styles. And you'll also notice on the right hand side then that they have this navigator with all the sections of the website. So that's pretty much how it works. And it does have a kind of a, I don't know if I want to call it a dated feel, but it does the look, the feel. For me, it a little bit dated, but still works. And then on the right hand side, you had this navigator, and that then listed all the sections. But it's hard to tell, what each of those sections would mean. So if we head back to the Brizy side, then we're going to do some editing. And you'll see it's a very clean interface, and the areas that you require when you're doing your edits appear right where your mouse is. So you'll see, for example, if we're looking at editing the texture, all the text tools are immediately visible. I don't have to refer to anything on the left-hand side. So it does keep a lot more real estate on the theme. So here I'm able to select, for example, a word and change the word and the color of the word. And if we head back to Elementor, we're going to try and do the same thing. So we're able to select the text. That was pretty easy with the indicators about where you are. But when you select a particular element in the text, you can change the bold, underline, italics, but you can't actually change the color. When I tried to change the color, it resulted in changing the color of all the text. So that wasn't ideal. So with Brizy, you do have the option then to target specific words and to style specific words in a different way. Maybe not necessarily a big difference in feature. So in the end, I had to opt for just, changing the style of one of the words. We went back to the Brizy side of things and, just looking at, being able to also do the bold and italics on the text. So that was very easy. Brizy did have a lot more of an intuitive feel when it came to editing the text. There we were able to select the font. So in Brizy, we were able to target specific fonts as well. So not just the color or bold or italics, but you can actually change the font of the word as well. So yeah, that was quite interesting. And that, of course, was not possible on the Elementor side. We then had a look at some other issues or some other features. Looking here at the button, you'll also see now that the button settings appear above the button. And we were just looking at the page and deciding we wanted to put in an anchor link, and we decided we'd scroll down to the testimonials at the bottom of the page. So just had a look to see what that looks like, scrolled up, then went across to the button, went over to the link and selected the block, scroll down, select the block you want to scroll to, and that's it. You've now created an anchor link to that particular section on the website. So that's how easy it was to set up the anchor link with Brizy. We went into Elementor and tried to do the same thing. So we selected Elementor, and then it was a bit of cat and mouse trying to find out what was available in terms of links. And there was no option to easily target an element on the page. You'd probably have to do this in a much more manual process. So unless you had a little bit of prior knowledge in terms of your HTML, it wouldn't be possible. So definitely Brizy was a bit easier then. So that was a nice feature there on the Brizy side. And then we wanted to just have a look at the styling. So we looked at, changing colors and borders and things. So, there we are changing the background color. And that was pretty easy. And then we wanted to do something on the hover. So you'll see there's the hover state indicator. And you're able then to almost immediately then start changing your hover button with the colors and the backgrounds and the borders that you want. So very easy to do, and everything you need is right there with the element. So you find that your eye doesn't wander, to the left-hand box and then back to the screen. So when we worked on the Elementor side, I did kind of find that I had to, I'd focus on the button, but then I'd have to shift my focus and focus specifically in the left-hand column, looking for the element that was relevant for the button. Once you found it, it was relatively simple to manipulate and change. So not too difficult to change the background color, and also to set up that hover effect. I also kind of found that I was flipping between the different boxes quite a bit. Um, so the Brizy is, because it's right there in front of you, your mouse strokes are a lot shorter. And I know it sounds like a crazy kind of thing, but if you look at how much screen you have to cross in order to perform a task, with Brizy, you can perform the same task with very little mouse movement. When it comes to Elementor, yeah, you have to really move your mouse all over the place. I just found it was a little bit detached when I was doing the editing and then, having a look at the results. But we were able to create the same hover effect. The one thing that we weren't able to do, though, as we saw before, was the navigation to an anchor link. But yeah, it was, relatively simple to set up the options for the buttons. So that went relatively quickly. Still a little bit easier on the Brizy side. And you can see I'm still busy having a look at my button here to see what I've got. And largely because I have to move my mouse so far between the colors and the hover, and it might be a small thing, but if you look at a web page over time, that's quite a lot of unnecessary mouse movement. So there we are. The next thing that we were going to have a look at. Right, so we're scrolling down to look at some of the other elements. And let's have a look and see. Right, so here we are in Elementor. We've taken away that right-hand section because it was, getting in the way a bit. And now I thought what we do is have a look at working with the icons and things with Brizy. And you'll see very easy to select a different icon. Yeah, super easy. And all the elements that you need are right there in front of you. So the next thing that we wanted to do was just have a look at a hover effect. So we select the icon, then we go to the colors, and now what we're doing is we're just going to select the hover effect and then apply a different color. So very easy to do. As you mouse over, the icon changes color, which is kind of what you're trying to achieve. Then we went back to the Elementor side and had a look at changing the icon there. So selected the element, and you'll see then that the icon appeared straight away, and we were able to go in and nice big icons to choose from. So that was really nice. Having the big icon just makes it easier to see. On the Brizy side, they are a little bit small. I don't know if there would be a way to make a bigger panel there for that. Then it was a case of just trying to change the colors of the icon. And you can't actually select the icon to edit the icon. You have to select that whole block. So that whole block works together in a way. And then what we did is we decided to see if we could, apply some kind of effect to the icon. So we did that on the hover. And then when we went back to the normal state, the icon was the same size. So I'm not sure what that icon normal and hover button is for, but whatever you change in the one, it changes in the other as well. Then what we wanted to do is look at some kind of an animation. So we selected the rotate, and we were trying to get the rotation there. So we set the rotation on the hover, but when we went back to the normal state, yeah, there was still that. It wasn't that intuitive to set up the rotation on the hover. So not too crazy about that feature, and never really got it to work properly the way that we wanted, where you would maybe have the dice spinning when you hovered over it, because the rotation was the same for the normal state and the hover state. So I was expecting the normal to be one number and the hover to be a different number, but that wasn't the case. So then we went over to the Brizy side, and we tried to do the same thing here. Now, while we could, change the icons around. What we weren't able to do on the particular item was to create a hover effect. So yes, we could create this rotational effect, as you can see there. But that was more to do with the page loading than it was with the hover effect. So we did try one or two things to see if there was a way to implement a hover effect. But that didn't seem to be possible. Not with the effect settings on the right-hand side, which look more at page loading, as I said before. So we went into the individual icon screen, but there was no hover effect for the icon. Yes, you can change the color. You can do all kinds of things there, but you can't actually add an animation on hover when it comes to the icon. So in the end, we just had to settle with the whole element rotating and not just the individual icon when hovered. So we spent a little bit of time there, maybe more than was needed, and then it was time to push on again. Right, so we moved on from the icon and then decided to maybe have a look at, changing an image. So on the Brizy side, you select the image background and then you're able to access. We deleted the previous one, went into the media library and had a look for a new image, and then decided on something relatively neutral and pulled that image in, and then we were able to position it exactly where we wanted it just by sliding that blue dot. It then adjusted the horizontal scrolling. It can also be used to adjust the vertical scrolling depending on the image aspect ratio. So then we went into the Elementor side and also tried to edit the image. So eventually couldn't really work out how to select the left-hand column. So eventually just a right click on the column was all that we needed to do, and we could edit the column. Then we headed over to the style, to the background, and deleted the image, went into the media library, selected the same image, and positioned it on the page. But what we find here is you do have a positioning option, but we found it wasn't as intuitive as the option on the Brizy side. So Brizy just made it a bit easier to get the positioning right by being able to move that little blue dot that you saw. There we just had to settle for, pretty much standard, as you can see, bottom left, bottom right, center left, center right, that kind of thing. But we did get the images pretty close in the end. So that worked out okay. Then we scroll down here to this piece of content and decided we wanted to do something special with it. So we decided we wanted a slider. So with Brizy, it's very easy. All you need to do is click on the element and then make it a slider, and you now have a slider. And if you look at the second image, you'll see that your slide looks the same, and then you're able to go in and make the changes. So whatever's there, we were able to edit, and we then decided to change the image. And you'll see what we did is we went for the sort of a cityscape from London. And what we wanted to do then was just manipulate the image a bit. And what we're able to do in Brizy is, besides being able to move the blue dot and get the image in the right spot, it's very easy then to also zoom in and use different parts of the image. And then you're able to, move that image right to where you want it to be. So the image manipulation is actually fantastic. There's no, serious CSS skills needed and measurements and that kind of thing. To edit the rest of the slide was very easy. We were able to go in, change the text. What we were also able to do to add a new font. So we headed over into the Google fonts, looked for a font, added it to our list of fonts, and we were done. And then we were also able to apply that font, which now appears at the top of the font list. So that was really easy to do. and we were then also yeah, able to get that slider looking good. Now the thing within the Elementor side is we weren't able to make a slider from the content. So I'm not sure if that's a feature that's even available within Elementor, but it was quite clear that there was no ready option to manipulate the content like that. So yeah, that was just something that's just not possible within Elementor. We decided to have a look at the fonts then, and you'll see that Elementor loads quite a lot of the fonts in there, and we were able to find the same font in the font list and then apply it to the text. And that was pretty straightforward, really easy, simple to do. So yeah, that was pretty easy, except we couldn't make the slider. Then what we wanted to have a look at, we were still looking here for a way to create the slider from the content, but yeah, quite clearly that's not going to happen. Right, so at the moment we were just finding Brizy was a little bit easier to use. Yeah, and there the slider was working perfectly. So we just updated that. And then, yeah, just thought we'd look at editing the logo, but then realized that that is part of the theme settings and in the header. In the next little chapter that we tried was with the layout from the Elementor side. When you hover over these icon blocks, the background changes color and the text goes to white. So we wanted to see if we could replicate that using Brizy. So first thing we did was we went over to look at the background and looked at the hover, and then we had a look at the color and realized that the background color, we could change that overlay color setting. So now we were able to change the background color to what we wanted, and that would work then on the hover effect, which is great. That's exactly what we wanted. The issue that we had though was trying to change the text color on hover. So we had a look at the settings within the text options. So we could get the background to change color, and that wasn't an issue. That was fine. But there wasn't a way to change the text on hover when it came to Brizy. We then had a look at, just to check, we had another look at it on the Elementor side, went back to Brizy, had a look at some more of the settings available. And while we could change the background color, and there was no immediate option for changing the default text color on hover. I know you could probably look at doing something with some CSS, but I just wanted to see if there was a way to do it within the interface from Brizy. So after looking around, and you'll see in the text settings, there's no hover. In the text color, there's no hover. And that's kind of linked to the section you're in. And I couldn't find a way to, if you're hovering over a column, to change the color of the text. And you can see how well it works there on the Elementor side. When you hover over those content elements, you'll see that the elements change color when you hover. So I went in and had a look at the hover state of that particular element, and it was it had a red color, but that obviously didn't have any effect. So what we did then is we looked at the default color and still couldn't get that color. So we did click on the right edit icon to head over into that section. So I'm not sure why, well, as far as the icon was concerned, we couldn't get the color to be different on hover in compared to its state. And you'll see there on hover, it should be green, but it still comes out as white. So we had a look then at the background colors, and here we could see the hover color on the background, and that seemed to work. But we couldn't get so we were looking for the typography now on hover so that we could change the color of the text. So when you're in the typography section, there's no hover state. You've only got the one state. So there we were having a look. So we looked at the typography, but we didn't see a hover element there. So not sure where you would adjust then that text color. So while it does work on the Elementor side, we weren't able to find the settings, and on the Brizy side, there was no setting to make that possible. So we did look around for a little bit, and then it was time to move on. So we had a look at this content element then, and we were just looking at what we could do there. So we were able to change the background color on hover. So we chose the blue, so that was great. So there we had the change in the background color, and we were looking to change the text color then on the hover. And we weren't able to see under text, there was nothing, and we couldn't see anything under the block. So I'm not sure where, it obviously is possible, but not sure where that setting is in order to change the color of the text. So we tried that for a while and then decided it was time to move on. We then moved on to see how the global settings work, like global colors. So we accessed the global colors here in the Elementor side and found it relatively easy to add a color and then just change the name of the color, and then the color gets added to your list, and you can add additional colors to your custom colors. Had a look at that and then decided we'd have a look and see how that worked in Brizy. And when we went into Brizy, we saw that we had a row of colors across the top, and it looked as though those were the total number of colors that you could have for your project. So it didn't look like there was a way to add any additional colors to what was already in that selection. The global colors work because you'll see that as I was changing that color, so the color on that button changes. So that was working fine. We just couldn't find a way to add an additional color. When you go to an element and you click on the color, you'll see that the little thumbnail or little swatches appear below, and they're exactly the same as the colors that we have selected in our list. At the bottom of that list of text with it's a sample, you can add additional elements, but these are text based and they're not related to the colors at the top of the page. So you can add more fonts to your page, but you can't add more color than what's already available. So then we went over here to the Elementor side and thought we'd have a look to see about global fonts. So there we were able to add a new font style, and then quite easy then to select a new font. Right, so there we have a new font selected, and that was pretty straightforward and easy. And then to apply that new font, so we were able to select some content, just waiting to go out of that settings option. So a slight bit of reloading there. And then it was quite easy to select the text, head over to the font options. So to style, typography, drop the default button, and that was the way to select the text. And we did find that if we went to the global settings, that the new style was at the bottom of the list. So, very easy to do, if you're doing it via the global font settings, which is how it's designed. So we found that really useful. And once again, easy to go in and edit the text afterwards. So that was how we did that. Then what we did is we went back to the Brizy side and did the same thing with the new font. So there we have the font. So we scroll down to all those extra fonts that we'd made, and you'll see it goes, 10, 11, 12. And so then we were able to, access a font, apply some settings, and then apply that to the text on the page as well. So there we are setting the settings for font style 10, and you can give it custom names. So you can call it button or whatever you want it to be. And then what you can do is select the text, and then under the typography section where you see the heading number 2, scroll down there and you'll see the new styles at the bottom, and we were able to select style 10 and apply that style. So that was the one way to apply styles to the text element. And then, of course, all the other settings apply when it comes to adjusting, content and boldness, etc. for the fonts. And the weight obviously depends on the kind of font. Some fonts don't have a lot of weights, others do. And of course, then the general text settings apply. And that's how you make the ordered list. So Brizy has a very flexible text element on the website. Everything from creating a heading to a paragraph, an ordered list, a bullet list, a numbered list is all done in that one menu. When it comes to Elementor, you can do quite a lot, but it's really specifically text focused. If you want a list of elements, you need to choose a different content element, whereas in Brizy, you're able to, just with a few clicks, change that setting. So when it comes to text, the Brizy approach is really quite interesting. So you'll see there is no ordered list in the list of elements. The ordered list is achieved simply by selecting the icon in the navigation, and there you could just expand and continue with making your list. So very easy on the Brizy side. That was the list of elements on the page. So if you want to move something up or down, it's very simple. You can see what it looks like. You can move it to where you want it, and you're done. It takes very little time. When we went onto the Elementor side and we wanted to do the same thing, we activated the navigator, and all you can see is section, 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 section. So you really spend quite a bit of time trying to work out what section is where. So we wanted to move that call to action up like we did on the Brizy side, and it was not as intuitive or as easy as hoped. Initially dragged up a column element instead of the correct section, which was my mistake. There is an undo facility within Elementor, and we were able then just to activate the undo, return the content to its original condition, and then select that section, identified it in the right hand side properly this time, and then just moved that up to where we thought it should go. And then it was a case of having a look to see where it was. We then had to just manipulate things a little bit until we found the right position for it. So not as easy to do as it without that visual cue. It's very difficult to do. And then once we'd positioned the element in the right place, we wanted to change some of the spacing. Now with Brizy, it's really easy. If you look at the element, you can quite easily just move your mouse and drag the amount of space before and after an element. So that makes getting the spacing between elements really easy. On the Elementor side, the only way that you can do that, there's no intuitive method of doing that. You do need to go into the settings and look for your margins so that you can adjust them. And it took a little while to work out where they kept. So it wasn't like you could select a section and then immediately make the changes. So it's, I found that once again, Brizy had a more intuitive approach to moving the content elements up and down the page. and then also when it came to adjusting the spacing. Right, so we're heading back to Brizy. Once again, adjust the space very easily, almost without thinking. It's actually very intuitive. Yeah, the next thing that we wanted to look at was some, further image manipulation. So we chose this very small image here, and what we wanted to do was, see what we could do with the image. And initially, we selected the overlay, and that works great. It adds an overlay color, whatever you want it to be. If you don't want the overlay color, one way is just to slide the transparency to 0, and now you don't see the overlay color. You'll see there we added a border, and then what we wanted to do was round that border. So we were looking for the settings to create a circular image, and the settings that we were looking for, we realized after a while, were not actually situated with the image. So this was a little bit confusing initially, in that we couldn't immediately find them. So the original image is actually round. So it wasn't a case of making the image round, but it also then had those white areas in the four corners. So what we wanted to do then was just create a border just specifically around the image. So we looked in a couple of places and then decided to go and have a look at the styling. So you'll see there we were able to adjust the size of the image, and we looked at the effects, we went to the styling, and then we saw that at the bottom there we have this corner box, and if you move that, you'll see that the image's corners have now become rounded, but a bit odd that it was separate from the borders within that little menu that pops up. So we decided to do the same thing with Elementor. So we clicked on the item, and the image appeared, and then it was relatively simple. We were able to apply the border. So you'll see under the image, we were able to apply the border, and that worked really well, really quickly. Was just looking for a selector called border and not image when I wanted to adjust the border, but be that as it may, we were able to do it. And then you'll also notice now on the image, after we created the border within Brizy, we found that it had this little white sliver in the top left-hand corner, and that's because the original image is white. And what happens then is when the when the border was added, it had that rounded effect. Here we are adding a drop shadow, and you'll see that we're quite easily able to change the size of the shadow. We can move it from left to right. We can move it up and down. We can change the amount of, or the value for the amount of blur. You can change the color. So you can move around and really create, the kind of drop shadow that you want. We had a look at doing the drop shadow then on the Elementor side. So selected the image again, and we could change the border. And while there were options for the border, didn't see anything available for the shadow. So you'll see here we did try and look at a couple of places, but there was no immediate shadow option. So I went back to the Brizy side, and then we just wanted to correct that white sliver in the image. So we selected the image. We could move that around, but that didn't have an effect because it's a square image and it's filling that space. So there's no maneuvering left or right. But then with a little bit of zoom, we were able to just enlarge that image enough to get rid of that white sliver. So yeah, the image manipulation, the adding borders, adding shadows in the Brizy side was also a lot more intuitive and easy. Then we decided to look at adding new content elements. So in Brizy, we hit the plus. We had a look at the free items because the the Pro wouldn't be available to us. Selected an item, and by coincidence, we selected an item where the background changed, and even there, the text color didn't change. So that's not great. It would be nice if there was a hover effect or a way to change that within Brizy. But nevertheless, we were able to add that content element really easily. So we decided to add some content in Elementor. So what we did is we selected the space to drop it in, and we just closed that navigator off. And now we were looking for content to add. So we needed to head over to the content elements, and we were trying to find some pre-made elements like we had in the Brizy where we could just select and drop in, but that was not immediately available. So we had a look around for a while and then realized that perhaps that was not standard when it came to perhaps the free version. There were WooCommerce elements towards the bottom, and there was some WordPress elements, but we couldn't find a standard element to drop in. So what we did then is gave that a little bit of a chance, and then decided to move on and add our own element, content element. So try that for a little bit. So yeah, there are a lot of individual items, but not the big pre-made content option. So we dropped in this element here with the columns, and then wanted to move things around a bit. But you'll see, not that simple. You really have to know quite a bit in Elementor to find out where all the settings are. So we then pressed on ahead, we added an image. So I decided to focus more on the content than some of the finer settings. And we were it was quite easy to add the image. We then added a title, a heading. So that was quite easy to do. We could add a heading, just drag and drop, and we were also able then to add some text. So head back to the content elements and add some text. So as you can see, relatively simple to do. We wanted to adjust the spacing within the column of the text. So we clicked on the edit column option, and we were able to change the alignment to the middle, and that kind of looked okay. So we wanted to see how we could do that in Brizy. So we headed off into Brizy and then decided to add our custom content element. And you can do that by create your own, as you see there. And then we head over to the elements on the left-hand side. So we look for column. We drop the column in, and then we decided to add the same image. So you'll see nothing happens if you click on that blue button. So you actually need to drag and drop the element onto the blue button or in that area, and then head over to the image. We selected the same image and immediately realized that we had a few more options available to us when it came to the image. So we could reduce the size, we could reduce the height. So not just the height of the image, but also the container that it's located in. So we adjusted the image to the way we wanted. Then we added some text. Now with Brizy, you just add the one text element, and from there you can decide if you want it to be a heading or just some paragraph text, which is really nice because it's much quicker than trying to look for different elements all the time. And then we also wanted to adjust the position of the text in the column, and we were able to do that quite easily just by pressing on the settings, and that was the default text. So it looked very similar to what we had in the Elementor side. And yeah, you can see just how easy it is then. There's more than one place to change the type of text. Also, to add space above and below the elements, you'll see you can add a gap above and a gap below. It's all part of the element. Inside the Elementor side, you need to know a little bit about your CSS. So in order to move that around, you've got to look for your margins and things, and there's under layout. And then you can, do the same thing there just by punching in the numbers that you want. So, yeah, you can achieve the same thing, but it's very much number driven. I didn't see a way to do that with a mouse, where you could just drag things up and down to create what you want. So, and if I missed that, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. In Brizy, the color changes when the mouse moves, so it's easy to identify. Right, so that done. We saved that. So we flipped back over into Elementor, and we're just having a look at the website on the Elementor side, and you'll see everything is pretty much as we created it. Everything is fine there, and then the same applies on the Brizy side, but the Brizy side just was a little bit easier. Just tested that scroll down, and it didn't scroll down. So quite easy to fix. We select scroll down, and then we just head over to the link, and once again we go to blocks, select the block, and we've just selected the block below, so quite easy then to select. We can update that. Once that's updated, we'll just head over to the website, we'll refresh the page. Right, so we click on the scroll down link, and you'll see it just scrolls up the little bit of content below it. So that's working great. Now just look at the rest of the page quickly. So now let's go and have a look at the difference in the pricing and the features. So we've seen how they both work. Here we are looking at the Elementor website, and we just want to have a look at the kind of pricing. So we're looking at the Page Builder plugin, and you'll see that they have annual licenses, $49, $199, $299, and $999 per year for the privilege of using their product. In Brizy, the pricing is a little bit different. They have the lifetime as well as annual fees. So here we're just looking at let's look at yearly first. So 49 for one, 99 for 100, 199 for 500. And then on the lifetimes, it's 149, 299, 399. So 149 for one time as opposed to 49 per year, 99 per year as opposed to 299 lifetime, and then annual of $199 or lifetime of $399. So Brizy definitely has a more, let's say, friendlier policy in terms of pricing. So when it comes down to which one do you prefer, well, they both do what they do. I have to say that I'm more a fan of the Brizy. I think it is more intuitive. What you need is closer at hand. So in my conclusion then, I'm going to highly recommend the Brizy side. I do think it's a lot easier to use. I do think the pricing is a lot friendlier, and if you're starting out and need a free tool, then the Blocksy combination with Brizy for me is a winning combination. Hope you enjoyed that video. Thank you for watching.